This is exciting. This is exciting, and I do believe that we have more people here tonight. I think this is a more packed room than we have had. So, Gregg, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I told Gregg that I wanted to introduce him and his program by saying that I think there's not a single soul sitting here who, when you entered the world, did not come into a world where George Coleman Motors was in operation in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. So, older than everybody, almost everybody here?
Almost.
Almost everybody here. And you will answer that riddle shortly, right? Yes. Gregg Coleman is our speaker, and we are delighted to have him. Gregg grew up in Travelers Rest. He's one of these old-time Travelers Rest. He went to the elementary school, which is now in the place where the parking lot is beside the library. Then he went to the school up on the hill behind us, or beside us, and graduated in 1976. That school's no longer here either. And then he graduated from Clemson in 1980. And then in 81, he began working at George Coleman Ford full-time, and he's been there ever since. He is an Eagle Scout. He married Sally Severa, and they have two children, Sarah and Jake, and they have a beautiful granddaughter, Vera, and who is around here somewhere.
She's been around already. Yeah.
She has greeted everybody, I think, since she's here. Jake is married to Kelly Hawkins Coleman, and they are Vera's parents. That's their claim to fame, is being Vera's parents. Gregg, we welcome you so much. Thank you so much, and we are delighted to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Can you hear me? Everybody hear me okay? So one of the things I thought about when Ms. Bishop was saying that is just Travelers Rest and how it's changed. And, you know, going back to the introduction, there's a lot that's changed, obviously, and a lot that's the same as it used to be. So we're going to explore some of these things, and I think we're going to have some pictures that you'll enjoy. But it is interesting in Travelers Rest now. I say this often with my wife Sally, who's here. We'll go out to dinner with friends, and it's interesting to talk about when you were saying that I was born here and raised here and stayed here, which is great, and I love Travelers Rest. But it's wonderful that a lot of you people love Travelers Rest too, because when we do our dinner, nobody else is from Travelers Rest. We're the only ones that are from the area. And it's just fascinating to see how Travelers Rest is changing and growing in a lot of really ways. So tonight, first of all, Jake was nice enough to give me his phone, which has the time on it. So I've often thought, I guess I've learned that too little is better than too much most of the time. So we won't go, I don't know how long I'll take, but it won't be too long, I promise you that. I'm going to tell a few stories, and I hope it'll be interactive. I have family here, and I have friends here that I'm just so thrilled to see. And some I don't see that often, except at funerals. So this is great. It's a different setting, but a lot of these people will be able to probably tell stories or enhance some of the stories that I'm telling, because believe me, they were part of it, especially with my grandfather, who's quite colorful. We'll talk about him a lot tonight. And I did want to thank the Historical Society. I appreciate you inviting me, and Sandra Beckham, who's not here tonight in particular. She was so wonderful to talk to, and it was great to catch up with her again. And I saw Roger and Joyce come in too, so appreciate that. Joyce is her sister. So first, let me just talk about one thing. Does everybody enjoy a birthday party? I mean, as long as it's somebody else's. I mean, don't you kind of really enjoy it? Or an anniversary. So, but, you know, you think about it, Ms. Bishop mentioned this, 90 years ago. We started the business, or my grandfather started the business, George Coleman Ford. So one thing that I wanted to mention tonight, in April of this year, it'll be our birthday or anniversary. So I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to do something special. So hopefully it'll be something that we all can enjoy. So that's coming up. So Jake, if you'll begin to go through some of these. First of all, I'm going to be talking about my grandfather a good bit, and a lot of y'all remember him very well. And this is him, George Coleman Sr. And if you'll flip to the next one, we'll have a picture of my dad, George Coleman Jr., and my grandfather, George Coleman Sr. So I'm going to begin with my grandfather. He was born in 1904. And, oh, I'm sorry, before I begin, I almost forgot. There is one person here, and I assume no others, that were born before George Coleman Ford was incorporated, and that is my father-in-law. He's sitting back here, Vince Severa. Some of y'all will remember, he's 93 years old. He's doing great. It seems like he's 53, if that. But Vince used to travel around, and he was an evangelist, and so some of y'all may have heard him or seen him in the past. But anyway, I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you, Greg.
But going back to, my grandfather was born in 1904. Somewhere in his probably late teens or early 20s, he grew up in Travelers, or he was born here in this area. And as the stories go, and again, y'all can probably help me with some of these. Oh, by the way, please chime in if you like to. But I think maybe his father was in maybe sheriff's department or something. He was somehow in law enforcement in the area. I don't know. I can't remember a lot of the stories about that. But so my grandfather grew up here. He moved to Florida early on in life, so he didn't stay in Travelers Rest all his life. He went to, I think it was the Miami area. And he always told a couple of interesting stories. So here are the Miami stories. This will tell you a lot about my grandfather early on. When he went down to Miami or whatever, the Florida area, Fort Lauderdale, whatever it was, his first job he got was as a waiter. And apparently at the restaurant where he was a waiter, they didn't have notepads or whatever, so he couldn't write down what the order was. So he loved to tell this story. He probably did it often, but he'd have a group of maybe 6 people or whatever, and he'd get this order and that order and whatever, and he'd go back to the kitchen and he couldn't remember one of them, which unfortunately in this family, that's, I don't know, we all seem to get that, right Jake? But he was able to overcome it very well, because he would go back, he loved to tell the story, he'd go back, he'd go, "Sir, I'm sorry, we're out of your order." He said, "But the special tonight is fantastic. I'm going to get that for you, and I'm going to give you a special deal on it." So everybody seemed to be happy. So he learned how to really interact with people, I think, in that setting. He made enough money to buy a dry cleaner. So he didn't start in the car business. He was in the dry cleaning business in Florida. And he told this story too. I don't know what this says about him, but he told about a lady who had a fur, and she had some kind of issues with the fur or whatever, and so he didn't know how to clean it, or he couldn't get it clean, but he said he poured a little gasoline on it and he fluffed it up really good and gave it back to her, and she thought it was the most beautiful thing ever. So he was a natural car guy. So, anyway, in probably, I think it was 1926, after doing a little research on this, there was a major hurricane in Florida, and I think it was called like the Great Hurricane of Miami or something like that. And it was a Category 4 hurricane. It scared him to death. And so he felt like it was time to leave Florida and move back up here. He did. And so he went into business selling, at the time, I guess it was used cars. It wasn't SUVs and CUVs. It was used cars, and maybe they had trucks back then. But it was in probably 1928 or so. He went into business with Mr. Earl Benson. And some of y'all will probably remember him, certainly remember the name. So they were together for quite a few years, and Jake, if you'll flip on over there, there's the old store. I know a lot of y'all remember some of that. And it's kind of interesting. He wound up, they had a chance to get the Ford franchise. And of course, that was in 1930. And Mr. Benson, for whatever reason, I think they were in business together for a little while, because you see the Coleman Benson Motor Company, but Mr. Benson didn't want to stay in the business. Yes, sir.
Where is that located at?
I'm going to tell you. That's a great question. But he wound up buying it out, so obviously it became George Coleman Ford. And I'm looking over here, and y'all can look over here, whichever is the easiest. But if you look to our left and the right, actually the right of the dealership, the sign, the American Cafe was in that section. And so, of course, now it's the Whistle Stop. So Vicki, rather than tearing the building down, I think she's done a great job of keeping something up and restoring part of our past here. But if you look to the other side, our right, the left of the sign, that was Joe Coleman Auto Parts. And I'm sure a lot of y'all remember Joe Coleman and the auto parts store too. So right now, I think probably exactly in that spot, it's a parking lot. Because it was torn down, I don't know, y'all may know, 20 years ago or so, something like that. One thing I regret is it had that big Ford oval on the front, and I wish I had gotten that when they tore it down, but I didn't. But anyway, that's where they were in business. And so after he got the franchise, he would tell me stories about, I can tell you there's a real contrast in what we do today and the way things operate today and the way they did back then, trust me on this. But he apparently played checkers a lot. Again, I know a lot of y'all are going to remember that. And he was a really good checker player. I think that was a very popular game back in the day, and so he got really good at it. And, we would play checkers together, and I couldn't beat him. I never could beat him. But so that was, I think it was like, he did tell me this. I mean, when a customer would come in, it would be, we've got to finish our checker game before we do business. And today, can you imagine if somebody came into the dealership and I said, I'm sorry, I got to finish my checker game before I show you a car or whatever. I don't think it worked too well, but things have changed. I miss some of that from the past too. All right, so anyway, they were, he started the business at a time where I'm sure it was pretty tough because in 1930, obviously the recession was going on and it was a tough time to get started, but they did really well. So we went to, we kind of made it to the World War I, or II, not one, already passed that, World War II. So that was 1941. And I don't remember, Jake, what's next, but you might pull that out. Okay, that's just showing what he was selling. By the way, that's on our showroom. So that's a 1931 A model that my grandfather sold new. And I think it was used maybe in the mail service around here for some time, and he was able to get it back. So anyway, that's what he was selling. And we brought these along, just kind of a picture of what we used to do with, I think, the Sheriff's Department in Greenville. And I think those were in the 40s, if I remember correctly. So used to do a lot of business with Greenville, too. And then what have we got next? Okay. So let me talk about the war. During World War II, apparently it was very difficult to do business at all. I mean, there was, all the manufacturing was going into things that they needed war, whether it was tanks or whatever, and Ford Motor Company was big part of that. So he didn't have anything to sell, and my grandfather, I don't know if it's because his father had roots with Sheriff's Department or whatever, but he loved the idea of law enforcement, and so he became a state constable. And he was quite brash, I would say, and he was quite confident. Would you all agree with that? The people that, yeah. And so he, at the time, he kind of got away from the car business. They didn't completely close down, I don't think, but he had a lot of time to do this other job, which is being a state constable. And up in these neck of the woods, apparently, amazingly, people produced alcohol up here. If you can imagine that, moonshine. And it was illegal at the time. Now, of course, you can go right on Main Street and buy whatever moonshine you want, but that's changed too. But anyway, apparently there were some pretty rough folks up here that made the moonshine, and I think a lot of law enforcement they were afraid to go into some of these places. So a couple of stories I heard, again, y'all are welcome to add to any of these, but one, my grandfather was somewhere up in the mountains up here, and so they kind of got in on this still. And so whoever the bad guys were, or not bad, they probably weren't that bad guys, it's just what they did, they made the liquor. They were trying to get away from them, so anyway, this guy is in his truck or car or whatever, and he comes down one of the mountain roads, and my grandfather is in the middle of the road, and the guy's going to try to run over him, and my grandfather did shoot. He shot through the windshield and shot the guy's tonsil, or one side, shot his tonsils out, is the story I heard. And then, of course, I heard that maybe this guy did business with him later. I don't know about that. He survived. But another story, and names that would be familiar, was, and I had it written down on another piece of paper, and now I can't remember. gosh, the people, let's see, they're up Highway 25, and they were in the trucking business, and they used Gosnells. Thank you. I thought that might spur a memory. So apparently the Greenville police or whatever were afraid to go to, it was Otho Gosnell, who made a lot of liquor up there. And so my grandfather was just one of those, he just wasn't afraid of anything or anybody. I think the neat story about this, he went up and arrested Mr. Gosnell one time where nobody else would go. But they did it in a way where I think they truly did really respect each other. It was like, you know, he knew that my grandfather wasn't afraid to do it, and he was doing his job. And Mr. Gosnell knew that, you know, he's making liquor, so he went in peacefully. That family, I can tell you for sure, bought a lot of vehicles from us because I sold them some and enjoyed doing business with them. I mean, they were really, really, the ones I knew were really nice people. So it's just kind of interesting how those things make full circle. Jake, I don't even know where we are on the picture. Oh, okay. So this is a great story, I think. So I got back, you know, once all that was done, he got back in business and business going along well. So state constable, guy comes in to trade a vehicle. And so my dad, and I think it could have been Joe Ford. Some of y'all will definitely remember that name, but I'll have a picture of Joe in a minute. But they were doing an appraisal on the guy's trade-in, and they didn't know it. And so they, you know, took a lap around the dealership or whatever and came back. And so at the time, you used to check and see if somebody had a spare tire in the car. You know, now everybody's spare tire is about like that, but it used to be big spare tires. So they were opening up the trunk to check and see, and there was a briefcase in there. And Joe Ford, I'm pretty sure it was, he was always curious and into everything anyway. You can remember that, right? So anyway, they got this briefcase, and I think it was just opened up enough where they felt comfortable with, it wasn't locked. So they opened it up, and it was full of cash. And so anyway, one thing led to another, and my grandfather came in to the office with a guy, and he said, well, you know, tell me about this cash and what's going on. The guy confesses. He had robbed a bank in Alabama. he had robbed, his name was Ernest McCarver. He was 27 years old. He had robbed a bank for $6,000 in Bridgeport, Alabama. He was on the run, and he was tired of trying to run away from all of it. And so he gave himself up. And what's fascinating to me is this picture is my grandfather's on the left. I think that might be the sheriff in the middle. And that's the perpetrator on our right. But check out this next picture. Do the next one, Dave. I mean, it's just like the Andy Griffith Show. Is that not amazing? And so, anyway, I don't know whatever happened to him, but it made for a heck of a story and a really neat picture, I thought. So, moving on, that was, you know, some of the really interesting times. We kind of got on to, if you'll go on, Jake, to the next one. I'm trying to think. My grandfather certainly, as many of you know, really loved and cared a lot about Travelers Rest, and he loved the idea of being involved in politics in town. So Travelers Rest was incorporated in 1959, and obviously you can see from here there was an election. I wish I could, if I could read it, maybe Jake can, but a lot of these people, again, y'all would know, I'm sure. But that's our first mayor and alderman that were elected in 1959. So my grandfather served from 59 to 65, and then I think it was Dr. Barnett that was elected after that. I might be wrong. Y'all might remember. Is that right? Yeah. And then after Dr. Barnett, my grandfather ran again at some point in time. Or, you know, he would run before, but he was reelected and served from 71 to 77. And again, I know he loved the town, and I'm sure he felt like he did a lot for the town, but I have a couple of pictures that I think are kind of interesting. You know, this is City Hall, and this is where the meetings take place now. That apparently is where the meetings took place back years ago. And one thing that I find, and that's my grandfather kind of sitting back in the back, I mean, one thing that's very interesting, I love diversity. And I'm thankful for diversity. And back then, there wasn't a lot of diversity. You can see it was just Because honestly, there's a lot of white men. That's just all it was. So that's changed, I think, in a very positive way. But something that was particularly interesting to me is Sally and I went out with our Sunday school class the other night to Chicora Alley. And so while we were in there, I went in the restroom to wash my hands. And I go in the men's restroom and I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure this is where they had this meeting. So, it is interesting, I mean, that has really changed. You know, so from the old city hall to the next city hall to this, you know, we made a lot of strides in Travelers Rest. It's pretty fantastic. So, and then I put this one in here just so you could see. I would say our sanitation trucks in the area may not be any different than this. I don't know, but I hope they've improved a lot. There's our first one from the city of Teal. All right, Jeff. And I just put a few of these in here just to kind of reminisce a little bit about, you know, things have changed, but some things that hadn't changed, or we still have our parade, our Christmas parade. It runs pretty much the same route. And if you'll flip through, Jake, on a couple of these. So we still have, you know, we have a good crowd. Now we have a really big crowd that comes to the Christmas parade. And then it lines up at the same place as always, which will be the next one, in front of the dealership in the Bank of TR. I mean, that hadn't changed at all over the years, so I thought those were kind of neat too. All right, you'll move on to the next one. Oh, and I put this in here because a lot of y'all will remember two people. I'm not sure who the guy with the bat is. I hope he wasn't about to hit anybody, but the one in the center is Joe Ford. I'm sure a lot of y'all definitely remember Joe. And then just to his left, our right, is John Spearman. They worked, both of those men worked for George Coleman Ford for, I'd say, at least 35 years. They were just fantastic people and fantastic employees, and their families are still around, and really great people. So anyway, I'm going to take us forward to 1981, and as Ms. Bishop said, that's when I started working at the dealership. And so at the time, probably in the 70s first, and I think we have a picture of, if y'all remember when gas was being rationed out, you know, I mean, that's a lot different now too. I went by Murphy, I guess yesterday or today, and paid attention, like, I guess it's $2.08, which of course is a lot higher than it was back then, but it's a lot lower than it has been too. So our gas supply in the United States is fine, I think, now. But in the 70s, it wasn't. I mean, you would be in line and you might not get gas.
74?
Yeah. So that's changed. And along that time, that's kind of when I think some of the foreign manufacturers got into the business. So we had, I don't remember which ones were the first ones. I mean, obviously you have Honda and Toyota or whatever, but VW, I think, was in it too. As a matter of fact, I see a little bug in that line right there, VW bug. So anyway, if you'll roll forward, Jake. When I started, this is what I had to sell against some of theirs. And that Pinto was a really great car, by the way. As long as nobody ran into the back of it, you were in great shape. That's on our showroom, as you can tell. So anyway, we went forward, and it's something that's just so different now. This is, y'all probably can't, some of you can remember this, some would be hard to imagine. When the new vehicles come out now, so like we're just going through the 2019 to the 2020s. And there'll be 2021s coming out before you know it. And they might come out in the summer, it could be in the fall, it could be next year. But days gone by that I remember very well, we used to, my dad and grandfather, and I'm sure probably many of y'all know where their houses are or located, where they lived. Back behind there is a pond, a lake. And so when the new vehicles came out, or the new model year came out, everybody got all the vehicles and they pulled them back where nobody could see them. And so there was an introduction day. There was a day, you know, that we were going to have the new car show. And it was incredible excitement. And then we'd bring them all out, and you'd get them from down near the pond, pull them out, and everybody came in to see the new vehicles. That's all completely gone now. I mean, really, you never know when a new one's going to come. I'm saying, like, 2020, there's going to be a 2021, or there might be a 2022 coming. It's just amazing to me how it's changed. So it's not as special in that regard as it used to be. and I do miss those days too. We had been located in the same place, and you saw our picture from the parade, so y'all all know where we are located, have been for. That building was built in 1963, and I don't remember the exact date, but probably in maybe the early 90s or so, we began to grow to a point where we needed more space. And so Bilo moved out, as many of you recall, from the shopping center that's just down by the Bank of Travelers Rest, and went across the street. So it opened up a building that was big enough for us to move into, so we did. We moved into that and did some renovations to it, and then we did more in 2001. And so kind of brought it up to that. So that picture, Jake pointed out, your model of the truck, so that's probably 6 or 7 years old. But anyway, that's where we are and have been for some time. My grandfather he was really something. He was quite dynamic until the end. He died in 1998. He was 94 years old. But I'm telling you, at 88 years old, I mean truly, at 88 years old, he was as active as anybody in the business. And if this is my take on my grandfather. I loved him. I mean, we spent a lot of time together, and I think he was a good and generous person. But now, he was feisty too, and if you were on the wrong, if y'all weren't on the same side, he'd fight you. I mean, really, and at 88 years old or 87 or so, I saw him go after a guy in a car that, I don't know what the guy was doing, but there are all these stories about, times that you just handle things differently in the past. Nowadays, you call the police. That's a smart thing to do. Don't do what my grandfather did, but he would take care of business, and he loved the business and lived in it a long time. And my dad enjoyed the business too, and I'm not going to get into a lot of stories because I don't have the time. My dad was a great person. I miss him too, and I dream about him often. But anyway, my dad and I worked together for many years, and so I'm very thankful for that. And now, as I'm getting close to closing with this, I want to go ahead and mention, and I've said Jake several times, this is my son Jake over here, our 4th generation. This is my daughter Sarah back here, the other 4th generation. So, and then y'all saw the 5th generation running around up front just a minute ago. So, we're quite thankful to have been in business so long. And I don't know, Ms. Bishop and I were talking about, there may be other businesses in Travelers Rest that have, or I think maybe it was Sandra and I don't remember. I know Charlene and I were talking about it, but there may be others that have been around longer and stayed in business longer, but I don't know that for sure. I think we're probably certainly one of the oldest and longest running businesses. So I just wanted to take a minute, and we'll go forward real quick, Jake. We can kind of, talk about the 90 years. That was a 50-year anniversary where there were some folks from Ford in. And this is the beginning of a few things that we're very honored to have won. That was I think it was called the North American Excellence Award at the time. And if we go forward, Jake, I'll come back to that one. Let me come back to that. These are some of our current awards, and I certainly don't want to brag on it. I mean, we make mistakes and we don't do things right all the time or whatever. We try to take care of people. We really do. And the President's Award is really special because Ford Motor Company presents this to, I don't know, it's like the top maybe 15% of Ford dealers. It's a really small number. It may be 10% or so that achieve customer satisfaction ratings based on surveys that are sent in by our customers. And I don't know, there might be one other Ford dealer in the upstate that's ever gotten one. And typically in the state, there are 2 or maybe 3 in the whole state when they go out. And we're very fortunate to have 6 of these. So part of that is because of y'all. I mean, you're our customers. And we have, I hope we have a really good relationship and can kind of take care of each other. And that's sort of the nice thing about being part of this community for so long, because we do care and y'all care about us too. So I think it really works well. So anyway, that's enough of that. Go back to that other picture, Jake. I put this one in here just because, you know, we were talking about my dad and grandfather and all. They used to love to fish. My grandfather, that was a real big hobby of his. My dad did too. I got it too. I love to fish. You know, for those of you like my daughter that may be vegan or whatever, I'm sorry. But I love to catch them and I love to eat them. Had some tonight, as a matter of fact. But I wanted to put it in here too, and I'm walking this way, and y'all can see it over there. So my dad is on our left. My grandfather is in the center, kind of holding the dorsal fin out. Beside him is the gentleman is Melvin Yount. Some of y'all may know him. He's an attorney in Greenville. His name is kind of all over a lot of places around here, so he's been generous in Greenville. And down below my grandfather is me, and that was, I don't know how old I was then, but I think I felt pretty awkward at the time. And beside me, I put this in here, I think is neat, is a friend of mine. His name is Doug Taylor. And it's particularly neat to me because Doug works with us and has for many years. So Doug and I obviously grew up together and were able to get together again in business, which has been great. We have a lot of people up there, like Joe Garland works up there. Many of y'all will know Joe. And Joe and my wife Sally were in the same class and went to Travelers Rest High School. And we just have a lot of people that have worked there a long time, and many, you know, that grew up in this area too. So I think we're getting close to the end. Oh, and I put this in here because I wanted to talk just briefly about some of the things that we do in the community that I hope make a difference. I don't know, but I'll go this way this time. This was, we did driver education with the schools in the area for Travelers Rest High School, forever. And then Greenville County decided to kind of change the program, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years ago. So we don't anymore, but one thing that's kind of neat about this is the man that's on our far right is Chico Boland. And I'm sure many of y'all remember Chico. He was, you know, one of the great coaches around here, and I think he enjoyed probably getting his picture taken with all those young ladies too. That's another picture. We have that on our showroom too. And I wanted to mention, these are some of our teachers in the area. We do, it's a great honor for us, and my daughter Sarah has begun kind of taking this over, but we do an Employee of the Month for each of the elementary schools in the area, and the middle school, and the high school. And, you know, they just do such an important thing, I think, for us. It's just such an important part of our community. So we wanted to say thank you in some way. And so you can see Sarah over there on our right, and we just do a little something for them each month. And then, I know that Jake and I think Sarah and Sally were all involved with Art on the Trail. So, you know, we like to participate with some of the things that go on in town. And I'll get to that in a second. I do want to mention one other thing that we do for a fundraiser is Drive for Your School, is what it's called. We have an event coming up Saturday week, so a week from this Saturday. And what that is for anybody that comes in and takes a test drive, and I promise you we don't put any pressure on anybody, it's just simply fill out a form, take a test drive. $20 for every test drive goes to the high school, and they can use that money however they want to. So high school likes it, we do too, so we try to do that twice a year. Ford will allow us to do it twice a year. So that's coming up a week from Saturday. And then I just wanted to mention, going back to the past to the future, this is our new car coming out, y'all. It's an electric vehicle. It's called the Mustang Mach-E, fully electric, and it's going to have a range anywhere from 250 to, I think you can get it with a battery pack that takes it up to 300 miles between charges. I think this is probably the way of the future. Ford's coming out with a new F-150 in 2021 that's going to be fully electric. And so, who knows? Maybe it'll help clean up the environment. I hope so. That'd be great. But things are changing, but there's still a lot of the past too. You know, we love the past and we embrace it, and you know, we're thankful to be here in Travelers Rest. And so that's my presentation, and I think I'm just about on time. So if y'all have any questions, I'd love to try to answer them. Or if y'all have any comments that I missed, particularly about my grandfather, by all means.
I've got one. Thank you, Greg. And I can recall a lot of his comments. Some of them wouldn't do repeating.
You got that right.
But one of the ones that I always remember, and I've commented on this a number of times to people I know, and it's kind of a Chamber of Commerce thing, but he used to say, I've been to London, Paris, I've been all over the world, and there ain't nothing prettier than coming back here and looking up at Paris now.
He did. He meant it. And along that same line, y'all probably feel this way too, but Sally and I were lucky enough to go on a trip to Colorado last week, and we celebrated her birthday. I won't mention which one. And I told her, it's a beautiful place. There was a lot of snow. I enjoyed it. I just couldn't wait to get back home. I mean, I do love Travis Rest, so that runs in the family for sure. Anything else from anyone? Any other comments? I appreciate y'all coming out. I hope I haven't bored you to death. But it's been fun. Thank you.
Greg, I think I can speak for the whole group of us. We appreciate it, and we have enjoyed it, and we have learned. And for those of us who are native Travis Rest people, you have brought back so many memories.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And we are very sorry that Sandra did not feel like coming tonight.
We sure are.
Sandra Beckham is the one that set this program up and contacted Greg and got everything going for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bishop.